Hello, my friends, and welcome. It's time for us to do some questions, and I've got a good list of them here. And so let's get started here. Mark Erb says, does time pass differently at the atomic level? Well, that's an interesting question. I have no idea, but I certainly have no question that it might, and that time passes differently at different places in the universe, depending upon any of a number of things. Some people suggest, for instance, that the yugas, as the Earth goes through, our solar system goes through this series of these large cycles that are 12,000 years long, and that the different characteristics of the different cycles, the 4 different cycles, among other things, is that time changes. As the whole idea of the yugas is based upon the notion that there's probably another planet, another star, another dark star that we can't see, but that there are the 2 stars and they go in an orbit and go around each other. And as they swing out and start heading in, then time seems to increase at the atomic level, where you have these things all flying around to different things, and there may be no time. I don't know. There are plenty of indications from people who have had unusual experiences that say they've gotten into places where there was no time. So I don't know. Dennis Alderton says, has Martin Armstrong revised his prediction for a major event in the last 2 days? Thanks, Dennis. You had asked this question back in near May the 8th or 7th, when his economic confidence model had suggested that there was a change in direction, a directional change that at that day, and nobody, including Martin, had suggested what it might be at that time. Had suggested that the last time it happened, it was COVID, and that there's any of a number of things that it could have been. He always talked about the fact that it was the same day as the election in Russia, and that Putin would probably be reelected, and that might be the basis for a change. There were any of a number of other speculations, but it wasn't clear. The basic notion here is that, in retrospect, for sure, if you look back at this period, you would come to the conclusion that that was the peak of the confidence, the economic confidence. Something happened that began a long trend that accelerates in a new direction. And one of the things that he talked about after the 9th, and he too was looking around saying, I don't know what it is that particularly that happened. But he said one of the things you might find out is that was the kind of the apex. That was the kind of the top of this kind of transition. This was the top, kind of a peak that then shifted and changed its direction in terms of the confidence that humanity, certainly Americans, had in the whole kind of coherence of international relationships. Diane Franzen says, how may I separate myself from the mass consciousness of fear that so many are trapped in? Well, there's a couple of things about that I'd say. One of them is that you have to have confidence, belief that the underlying system is benign, that it's loving, that the essence of the creative force is love, and in fact that the underlying energy field from which all of the reality that we experience arises is in fact love. So you got to believe that it has purpose and direction, and that it is, and by the way, for me, you got to believe that it's happened at some place, other planets, other civilizations, and these guys, whoever is involved in giving direction and helping us along, know what they're doing. And what that means is that there's real good hope that this is going to turn into something pretty exciting and pretty interesting. So Teresa Albert Thompson, as our it's largely about coronal mass ejections. And if there was a big flare from off of the sun, what would that do to all kinds of things like pacemakers and other kinds of brain implants and other kind of artificial kind of electronic things that many people have? If you had a really big, kind of like the Carrington event, which was in 1859, I think it was, that what you have is a large kind of magnetic field that when it crosses, when it hits the earth, and particularly when it crosses wires, conductors, what it does is it produces a current in the conductor, depending upon kind of where the field, the pulse is coming from, what direction it's coming from, depends on whether the electrical pulse goes one direction or the other or another. If we were hit full on by one, then it would be disastrous. Airplanes would come out of the sky because it would generate spurious currents that fry the electronics, the avionics in an airplane, and you'd have surges that would run down the wires, and when they came to the end and hit your computer or whatever it was, then they would fry a lot of those kinds of things. And that's similarly the case, I would think, with things like implanted technology, electronics in your body. If an event like that happened and it was unabated, it would effectively drive the planet back to the Stone Age. So it's really not worth thinking about. What you really want to think about is all of the ones where you can do something about it. And if the internet goes out with the advanced kind of world that we live in and the interconnections and dependencies that we all have, that if you drop the internet net goes down for any serious length of time, we're all in big trouble. Because, like I say, you can't do transportation because the gas pumps won't work and so on. So there are presumably ways in which you can kind of shield some types of equipment. The government and the military, they call it Tempest, the Tempest thing they do, special kind of covers and cabinets around some equipment that would not let its energy come in. There are no cracks anywhere, so there was no way that the energy could come inside. That's really quite expensive. And for most people, and certainly for most systems, economic and non-military are not that way, and so we would have problems. Kathy Adamski is back. Hello, Kathy. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different questions. Is the sun giving off more energy than we've experienced in decades or centuries? And is there a big burst coming toward the Earth after the eclipse? There's no big burst. There were a series of solar flares. They're not coronal mass ejections in the massive terms that we're talking about. But there were 7 of them all within about 3 days back here a couple of weeks ago. And so we still haven't seen a big one. And if you are particularly interested in preparing and trying to set yourself up to be able to kind of live through one of these things, if it's possible to live through it, then you ought to check Ben Davidson. It's suspiciousobservers.org, I think it is. It could be. And the O in observers is a 0. Suspiciousobservers.com. Maybe it's .com. Anyway, he's the most articulate and insightful guy about that whole possibility, and he can give you all kinds of ideas about how you prepare and what you can do. Number 2, Kathy says, my husband and I both have noticeable short-term memory. By the way, the energy from the sun clearly affects not only the physiology, the biology, and the mental kind of things of humans, but also the social interactions and such. There's a clear kind of correlation between, wars and stability and instability and so on. The other rumor is that there are no nuclear weapons. There's nuclear power. Really didn't drop a nuclear weapon on Japan. because it was a firebomb or some other kind of thing. I don't think so. I don't think they blew up all these holes out in the test site in Nevada, hundreds and hundreds of sites. And I've known scientists that were involved in that, and they weren't doing anything with the firebombs. They were designing nuclear weapons, and they were trying to blow them up, and so, or test them at least. And so I don't think anybody that suggests there aren't nuclear weapons. I don't know where they come up with that. She says, I heard Tennessee successfully banned chemtrails. Yeah, that's true. I don't know about successfully, but they certainly passed a law that said they don't want any overhead. I think Alabama did. There may be a couple of states now that have done that. They stopped in South Carolina near Charlotte years ago. Okay. And so it's the UFO and the extraterrestrial issues and the election fraud and all this stuff is all kind of aggregating and rising and getting to the place where more and more people, it's just becoming self-evident that the system is broken, badly broken, and that it isn't going to get fixed. So Rebecca Capon says, which of the off-planet races or civilizations do you think have negative intentions for humanity? I don't know for sure. It's hard to tell. Some people talk about that. Those from the Orions being kind of malevolent, but it's very, very hard to know what's really true in this space. And I've read a whole lot of the books and heard a lot of the people, and we're going to have some, come and be speakers in transition talks because they're very interesting. And, there's something happening in that space, and they're an integral part of the transition process. And so we need to understand that. I mean, one of the biggest things that is happening to humanity, frankly, is this expanding awareness of the fact that we live in an environment, a community, a neighborhood that has a whole lot of their life that we never really fully understood what it was. And one of these days, perhaps sooner rather than later, we're going to start talking across the fence and realize that there's other players here, and they may not all be interested in what we're interested in. So we got to figure out how to deal with that. That's Brad says, hi, John. Thank you for everything in the Arlington for the important work you do. In the interview with Frank Jacob, The Great Taking by David Webb was mentioned. After reading the book, can you share your perspectives on this topic and do you think this may play out? If there's anything that I've learned in the many kind of things that I've done in many different areas and where I've operated, and the way that it's structured, there's layer on layer and all compartments and all kinds of things that they're trying to keep all kinds of stuff away from you. There is no doubt that there's just conspiracies, if you will, going on all over the place. So what David Webb was talking about is saying that there over the years, what has been put into place over decades has been put in place the legal basis whereby that if there is a major catastrophic event, that the government can effectively, it's not the government so much as the banks, can effectively sweep instantaneously all of the value out of any account that is both digital and that is an ongoing obligation, that is to say, like a mortgage or a car loan or anything like that, stocks and bonds that are held in digital accounts for which you are dependent upon an intermediary that's like a brokerage firm or a mortgage banker or somebody else who is holding the asset for you. And the whole notion is that if there's some disastrous thing that happens, that rather than allow you to retract your assets, that is to say, go to a bank and take your money out, what there is, these laws that have been put in place and the technology, the software and things, that they can, boom, punch one button and the thing sweeps all the assets out, and you're left without, the little guys are all left without anything. Linda Lewis, how can we help? I am do to have a hip replacement? I'm being told they might decline to do it if I don't submit to a PCR COVID test. Can they do that? Can they refuse my surgery? I don't know. I guess they probably can. I guess they can decide to do whatever they want to do. I'm looking for a way to kind of defend against that. Then I'd suggest that you go to the WHO and the CDC, both of which, as I understand it, have come to the conclusion that the PCR test is ineffective and generates extraordinary number of false positives. And that is exactly what the inventor, the PCR test, got a Nobel Prize for, said it could never be diagnostic. Harry Mullis was the inventor of that. He rued Anthony Fauci and said, this man is a fraud. And, I mean, this is the guy who invented it, got the Nobel Prize. And so the whole basis for this so-called pandemic. There was no pandemic because now it's becoming clear that there was no pandemic because it was all based upon this PCR thing, and the PCR thing was worthless. If I were you and I was concerned about that, I'd go get these things and go and take them, show them, because I know that in the hospital they still don't. They just keep doing what they've been doing, and they're really not at the leading edge of change. That's for sure. Kathy Adamski. Can you evaluate the pertinent truths of Victor Davis Harwood's interview with Jan Jelinek? No, I have no idea about who he is. I have no take. I don't know. There's all kinds of people say all kinds of things about all kinds of other people. And so I have no way of knowing who's on first anymore. There are people saying that they're all big playing a game and that they're all body doubles all over the place and on and on. My late friend, Robert David Steele, told me that he used a mask, a full, a head mask. And so they exist, obviously. I've seen the videos of them. So how do you know it's real? I don't know. Which is part of the reason why I'm so interested in just the future and trying to build a new world. Because if you're trying to sit here and handicap the implosion of this old world, then you get driven crazy. What we need to do is disconnect from all of that and start pointing toward what we're going to build, a new world, new country, and some things like that. Richard Tyson says, this is more a question for Greg Braden, but I appreciate your thoughts. Listen to Greg's video on the Israel-Gaza war. I think Greg might have it wrong. It's not just a question of condemning Hamas, which I also condemn. We were deceived. I think that Greg may not have the full picture. There's a video that makes the case that the Hamas attack was an inside job. I've seen some of those. I've seen those interviews with the former commanders in the IDF, the Israel Defense Force, who used to command the borders, and they said it's impossible that Hamas came across that border and we didn't know it. It's absolutely impossible. I can tell you that a small animal cannot come across that border and we wouldn't know it. And then that person, and I've heard other ones in the IDF who've come forward and say this can't be. There are just levels and levels and levels of defense and depth, and people who are all ready to fill the gap. And the notion that they sat there for an hour and a half with tractors and bulldozers and cut up the fence and we didn't know about it, it's impossible. So I think that my inclination is that that's probably true, that it was an inside job and that there was an excuse for the Israelis to eliminate their problem, which is Gaza. And certainly the United States is complicit in that because there's The two countries, if you haven't noticed, are kind of joined at the hip. And he says that I think this October 10th event has a lot of similarities to 9/11 and the JFK assassination. Absolutely. There's, like I say, there's all kinds of people doing all kinds of things, and they don't want you to know. And they are certainly not good for humanity and for the future of humanity. And that's why what we're confronting here and looking at in the coming years, in the handful of years, is the breakup of the old reality and the break out of a new group to build a new world. This is extraordinary. I check the news and the other kind of things every day so that I don't get surprised. I don't. When you get surprised and you haven't thought about something, then it generates fear, and you don't want to be in fear. Make sure that we got water and electricity and some extra food. I mean, we're doing all that here in Berkeley Spring and trying to build community but we're headed and aiming toward a future. We're going to a new place. We're becoming new humans. We're trying to learn how to manifest and generate telepathy and other kind of things that are going to be the characteristics of these new humans. And so don't get caught up in all the drama. That's what they want you to do. That's what they want you to do. So thanks very much, and we'll see you again.